Months after breaking Adrian's heart, I can't shake the guilt. I let my own experiences corrupt my reason. At 21, freshly recovering from my own crises, I chose fear over love. Now, seeing them happy with someone else, I'm haunted by what could have been. What do I do now? This will be a lengthy one. First of all, I will not deny that I acted completely in the wrong here. The entire situation was chaotic, and it really did not have to be this way. I simply kept getting in my own way. About 6 months ago, I met the individual in question. Let's refer to them as Adrian through a mutual friend. I was freshly 21 at the time and coming down from one of the worst years I had ever experienced. For context, some intense familial conflict brought to light old unresolved traumas that I had long buried, which I dealt with by diving headfirst into alcoholism. I lost nearly all my friends, my communities, and hurt people in ways that I am still grappling with today. I was consumed with anger and despair, and I self-destructed. I will not defend it. I should have sought help, but the further I fell, the more people turned their backs on me, and I felt terribly, terribly alone, falling back into the bad habits I had learned to rely on. Compounding this was confusion regarding my sexuality, and by the end of it, I felt completely unrecognizable to myself. I came to loathe myself. I frequently contemplated dying. Thankfully, it did not last. With the assistance of some friends who, in retrospect, I took completely for granted, I gained control of my relationship with alcohol and lifted myself out of the cycle of despair I had fallen into. I removed myself from the environments that were exacerbating the issues and managed to find some stability. That was about a year ago now. I would not say I am healed, but at least I am stable and in a much better place than I was back then. However, some wounds take longer to heal than others. One aspect of my self-destruction involved a young woman I knew at the time. She was a couple of years older than I, incredibly intelligent, beautiful, funny, and charming, the whole package really. At some point, I began to obsess over her. I feel that if it had not been for what I was experiencing at the time, it would have been a normal crush. However, I was seeking relief from it all, and somehow I convinced myself that if I were only with her, things might improve. It was an absurd notion, but it took root in my mind and grew like a parasite. Google Limerence, it essentially describes what occurred. After I was confronted about it and it mostly dissipated, I became utterly disgusted with my behavior, the obsession, the constant conversations about wanting to be with her, and the scenarios I fabricated to get close to her. I scared myself. I felt that my love had transformed me into a monster. Remember this, it will be relevant later. Returning to Adrian, we met through a mutual friend about 6 months ago at the beginning of the semester. Both Adrian and my friend were freshmen at the time, and I was a junior. Adrian and I seemed to immediately connect. They tended to lead our conversations, but they made a significant effort to listen to me and genuinely include me to make me feel valued and heard. We shared a lot of interests. We enjoyed similar media, held comparable opinions and beliefs, and were even considering similar paths in life. I thought they were really cool. From the start, I liked them a lot, and it appeared mutual. We eventually joined a group of friends to watch a movie, where Adrian and I sat together. We joked and laughed throughout, and afterward I walked them back to their dorm. We exchanged phone numbers, and I thought that would be the end of it. Later, however, I received a text from Adrian saying that their friends had canceled on them for a night out. They mentioned they were probably still going to go out regardless. I became concerned for them, given their short stature and young age. I did not want anything to happen to them, and I was also eager to participate in some welcome week festivities, so I decided to join them. We met at their place, had some drinks, and chatted before heading to a house party. The party was somewhat dull, so we left and ended up at a fraternity event. After a couple of hours, we were intoxicated. My apartment was close by, so I suggested we return to my place for more drinks. I did not have a specific plan, I was merely tired. They agreed, and we went back, had a few mixed drinks, and started a movie. We sat on the couch, and they draped a blanket around both of us. This is where my memory becomes hazy. I do not recall how it happened, but the next thing I knew, we were kissing passionately. We moved to my room, tidied up a bit, and engaged in sexual intimacy. Eventually, morning arrived and they departed. We arranged a coffee date for later that week. I wanted to create something real from this connection. I truly felt a bond, and I could not stop thinking about them. After the turmoil I had endured just months prior, it felt like my first win in a while, the beginning of something beautiful. Unfortunately, as fate would have it, I fell ill with a severe flu the next day that left me sick for weeks. We postponed the date for a week, but I was still recovering from whatever bug had afflicted me, and I felt really out of it. They also seemed a bit off. Perhaps they were just nervous, or perhaps it was due to other issues. I later learned they were dealing with some problems involving their roommate, so that could have been the case. Regardless, I left that interaction feeling uneasy and began to second-guess everything, wondering if they viewed it merely as a hookup. Nevertheless, I still had feelings for them. I desired them. I felt butterflies every time I thought of them. But I decided to leave it up to them to decide how to proceed. Then came the external influences. The friend group I spent a lot of time with began discussing age gaps frequently, due to an 18-year-old friend of a friend dating a 23-year-old. They all seemed to agree that anyone above the age of 20 dating someone that young was in the wrong. I did not entirely agree, but I did not strongly disagree either. I believed both parties were adults and should be free to make decisions as they felt appropriate. But those years do mean something, and many factors need to be considered: goals, life stages, maturity levels, etc. However, they appeared adamant that it was wrong regardless. And I began to worry about how a relationship between Adrian and me might be perceived by our friends and how we might be viewed by others. Additionally, I allowed my own past experiences to cloud my judgment. I had been in a year-and-a-half-long long-distance relationship during my freshman and sophomore years of college. After high school, it transitioned almost exclusively online. We managed to meet up once or twice, but it was a rare occurrence, especially since she attended school across the country. The relationship began to deteriorate around the same time as the rest of the aforementioned chaos, which did not help. After taking time to process it, I ultimately felt like I wasted a lot of time and that it caused me to miss many opportunities for exploration and growth. I projected these feelings onto Adrian. I did not want to waste their time and leave them feeling stunted as I had felt, which ties into another factor, my self-confidence. I still did not possess high self-esteem after everything I had been through, so I feared that once they truly got to know me, they would eventually come to despise me. I did not believe I deserved their affection and therefore I should not have had it. Perhaps that was selfish of me in its own right. After all, who was I to presume such things for them? Yet I did so anyway. Then there was the lingering memory of my last obsession. I did not want Adrian to become like that, did not wish to love too intensely and overwhelm them with it. I feared my ability to love. This, along with everything else, led me to decide to simply let the whole situation wither away. But fate had different plans. 2 months later, I was out with some friends when I received a text. It was Adrian. It had been a while since we last communicated. We began chatting. They were looking for something to do, so afterwards I invited them over to hang out again for a movie. I met them at their dorm and we returned to my place, which was not far. However, when we went upstairs, my roommate and his boyfriend were on the couch. Thus, we decided to go into my room to watch the movie on my laptop. On my bed. Predictably, we ended up being intimate again. Afterward, we lay together, talking and whatnot. I do not recall precisely what question was asked or what was said from either of us, but the essence was that they requested to be exclusive, and I gave a non-committal answer that came across as wanting something casual. They seemed confused and hurt by this. Why would they not? I attempted to clarify my response, apologizing and trying to convey my warped perspective on why it would not work, but it all just sounded like excuses. Eventually, they fell asleep. I could not. I lay awake all night feeling like the worst person alive. They felt secure around me, and I ruined that for no valid reason, and throughout the night, I wished I had the courage to express how I genuinely felt. The sun rose again and they woke up. We chatted, almost as if nothing had gone wrong. I told them I still wanted them in my life despite what had occurred. I walked them back to their dorm and we parted ways. A month passed, we had our winter break, and the weight of my actions hit me all at once. I realized what I had thrown away and how I hurt them. I resolved to make amends, to stand firm and be the boyfriend they deserved. After we returned from break, I properly asked them out to dinner and a movie at an actual theater, mind you. They replied that they were interested, but they were kind of starting to see someone, so it would have to be just as friends. I was shocked. I truly did not know how to respond. I was working when I received their message, so I decided to wait until the end of my shift to reply. This ended up looking as though I had left them on read and that I only wanted physical intimacy, so naturally they blocked me. The messages were on Instagram. I realized I could not message them and suspected that they might have blocked me. I did not know until they informed me, so I reached out by text to let them know I was okay with being friends and explained why I took so long to respond. They unblocked me and left the door open for friendship between us if I was interested. That was 3 months ago. I still have not replied. I did not know what to say then, and I still do not know now, or even if it would be worthwhile to say anything at this point. I want them in my life, but I still have feelings for them. I have seen them twice since they sent the message, once while I was out with another guy. They both seemed happy together. I do not think Adrian noticed me. The other time I was in the dorm waiting for a friend. I was looking down at my phone, and when I looked up, they were right in front of me. I froze. They were with a group and it did not seem like the right time to speak. I offered a meek hi and turned back to my phone. I do not know what I saw in their eyes when they looked at me. It seemed like sadness or perhaps disappointment. I recognized that I did this to myself. I was a fool who did not know what he wanted. I sought something serious and genuine, but when I had it, I overthought everything and could not even identify how I truly felt until months later, far too late. I desire to communicate with them to at least clarify the situation, but I fear it is too far gone at this point. And it is excruciating. I do not want my memories of them to serve as a lesson. They opened themselves to me, and in the light I sought for so long, someone who actually seemed to care, I faltered. I hurt them, destroyed the sense of safety they felt with me, and naturally they sought refuge elsewhere. And here I remain, tethered to the memory of what we had, my mind tortured by what-ifs. I just wish I could be that person for them again. the person they believed I could be before I allowed doubt and insecurity to shatter the illusion. And the most painful part is that the doubt and insecurity were the illusions concealing my true feelings. I have no one to blame but myself. I do not know what I am going to do. I do not know where to begin. Story 2. My girlfriend said you're so fing stupid for mishearing her, and in a heat of anger she threw my keys at me and told me to leave. How did a simple misunderstanding turn into this chaos? Alright, I will attempt to explain this from both perspectives and include what was said on both sides, as well as some context from past events when necessary. We had planned to have dinner with a couple of friends after playing our weekly soccer game. We arrived much earlier than they did, so by the time they would have shown up, we would have almost finished eating. She mentioned that we might not stay the entire time, to which I consented. They arrived, got their food, and we engaged in conversation. I began discussing matters with friend A, while she talked with friend B. As I conversed with friend A, I shifted my foot and accidentally bumped into hers. We were sitting across from each other. Looking under the table, not realizing it was her foot, I apologized. I continued my discussion and she persisted with her conversation, and about 2 to 5 minutes later I was drawn into my own conversation, so this is just a rough estimate. I felt her foot again. Assuming she was trying to grab my attention, I paused my conversation with friend A to inquire what was going on, but she did not respond in a way that prompted a reply from me. I also cannot recall her exact reaction, but I remember feeling quite confused and somewhat brushing it aside. As a side note, the second time she hit my foot was entirely wiped from my memory, a detail that will be significant later. After a while, we left. During the car ride home, we discussed how it had been a pleasant time, but my girlfriend mentioned she was not feeling her best and was unsure what was wrong. I dismissed it as residual feelings from losing the soccer match and did not think further about it. When I asked her, I received an "I'm not too sure." Once we reached home, I went to unload the car and had the keys with me. The soccer shoe bags were in the back seat, so I went around to retrieve the dirty laundry from within the bags. We leave our shoe bags and shoes in the car. I was now seated in the back seat with my legs hanging out of the car while she stood by the car door and asked for the keys, which I handed to her. I returned to grab the laundry and realized my wallet was missing, prompting me to search for it among the clutter in the back seat. During this time, my girlfriend began to walk away, unaware of what I was doing, and stated that she was going to fetch the mail from the mailbox, as we both live in separate apartment complexes. For some reason, I did not hear her, likely because my head was in the car and she was 20 to 30 feet away from me. She repeated herself, but I still did not hear her. Finally, she raised her voice and all I caught was, "Get the mail." I called out 1 second, since that was all I had heard, and at this point I found my wallet and made my way to the apartment door. Upon arrival, I discovered the door was locked and the interior lights were off. Confused, I called her to ask why she had left the door locked, to which my girlfriend reacted, "You are so ignorant," before hanging up the phone. Putting two and two together, I sat and waited for her to return, inquiring why she went to get the mail, thinking she had asked me to do so. She replied, "Well, if you had been listening to me, you would have known." I apologized for mishearing her, but received no response since I was under the impression she had asked me to go get the mail, when in fact that was not the case. Upon entering our home, I placed the laundry away and began doing the dishes from dinner earlier. She removed her socks and lay down on the couch, mindlessly scrolling through TikTok. After a while, I went to check on her and she seemed to be in a bad mood. I asked her what was wrong and she said, "I feel like you do not listen to me." Unaware of anything else troubling her, I offered to leave her alone for a few minutes and she agreed, so I went upstairs to make the bed and start the laundry. When I returned downstairs, she requested that I grab her ankles, but I misheard her request as rub my ankles. Thus, I headed back upstairs to fetch lotion, only to be met with a very confused yet condescending, "What are you doing?" I explained that I was getting lotion to rub her ankles and she said, "No, I said grab my ankles. Once again, you are not listening to a word I say." She had numbness in her pinky toes and wanted me to shake her ankles to improve blood flow. At this point, I felt extremely confused and apologized to her again for the misunderstanding, to which her response was, "I feel as though you never listened to me." For context, I have a tendency to be defensive and previously struggled with dishonesty, but I have made significant improvements in regaining her trust and have learned to manage my defensiveness. Additionally, I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and am currently unmedicated. It becomes challenging for me to remember how to avoid being defensive when I feel attacked and am confused about what is unfolding. Amidst my defensiveness, I explained to her that I misheard her concerning the ankle issue and that I genuinely did not hear her about the mail. She labeled it absolute nonsense and stated that I was concocting excuses to cover my incompetence. At this point, we were both at our worst. She was in accusatory and bulldozing mode, convinced that her point of view was the only valid one, while I was in defensive mode, attempting to clarify my side and not acknowledging any wrongdoing. I queried her, though with an inappropriate tone, "Is this why you called me ignorant earlier?" To this, I received a shrug and a look that suggested, "What do you think?" She proceeded to assert that I am a liar and that it is unacceptable, prompting me to turn away as she continued to berate me. I told her that I was done with the conversation if all she intended to do was belittle me. As I moved away, she shouted, asking where I was going, and I reiterated that we were not having this conversation if she could only resort to insults. We both had previously agreed to step away when arguments escalated. Realizing it was getting heated, I began to withdraw. However, I guess she was too angry to allow it to go, so she followed me upstairs, questioning where I was going and declaring that it was rude to just walk away, which I acknowledged. I could have exited the conversation more gracefully. Nonetheless, I reiterated that we were not discussing this right now. As I descended the stairs to sit in the living room, she swung her Walla water bottle at me and struck me in the back. I am a smaller framed individual at 56. She is 54, but outmatches me in most physical strength feats. I nearly lost my balance, but managed to maintain my footing and continued walking downstairs to the living room, once again repeating that we weren't having this conversation at present. At this point, she mentioned what had transpired at the restaurant. She informed me that she had hit my foot intentionally to gain my attention and indicate that she was ready to leave. Unaware that she was referring to the second instance and not the first, I became confused, believing I was the one who had bumped her foot accidentally, which prompted my glance under the table, and I apologized. She persisted in insisting otherwise, raising her voice, asserting that this was not what transpired. I was in denial regarding it having happened, as I had forgotten that it did. Only then did she clarify that the situation she was referencing was the second instance where she had hit my foot deliberately, which had interrupted my conversation and prompted me to ask, "What?" That memory gradually returned, and I expressed that I hadn't realized that's what she was attempting to do and that she wanted to signal her readiness to leave. I responded, "I did not understand that was your intention," which elicited 2 points from my girlfriend. 1. Do not pretend now, because 5 seconds ago you did not remember, and were arguing aggressively that it didn't happen due to your defensiveness and inability to acknowledge wrongdoing. 2. We have discussed situations like this before, so you should know how to avoid embarrassing me in public. I inquired why she had not mentioned this while we were in the car on the return, as normally we would address any discomfort arising from a social interaction promptly once we were in private, so as to avoid forgetting the events or harboring resentment over time. She replied she forgot because it was overshadowed by the pleasant conversations we had. God forbid I forget things. I acknowledged that I understood now that I knew what she was attempting to communicate, but stated that in every previous instance of this nature, we had discussed it even 5 minutes before arriving, with her indicating whether that would involve squeezing my hand or tapping my leg 3 times when she was ready to leave or signal something else, which we had also previously conversation about before attending other social events. She countered by asserting that she should not have to tell me and that I should naturally understand what was happening, that it was implied, and I should not require a verbal reminder each time such a situation occurred. As a side note, this reasoning appears somewhat contradictory to me and disrupts the pattern of discussing it beforehand, so I am aware of what to look out for. Moreover, we had ample opportunity to talk about a signal to anticipate before our friends arrived, given they were almost 25 to 30 minutes late. After this, everything became a blur to me. The main memories I recall include the following, not in order. 1. Her accusing me of being a liar, suggesting I fabricate narratives because I cannot admit wrongdoing when I was simply trying to clarify my perspective. I told her she resembled a freight train, trampling over everything in her path because she did not care to understand my viewpoint, which caused me to want to shut down and distance myself from her. 2. Her angrily manipulating the same water bottle she had thrown at me, repeatedly slamming it against the sofa. 3. My attempts to explain my perspective and how her expectation for me to just know her signal disrupted the pattern we had established over the past year, which I consider unfair, while she dismissed my explanations as nonsense. 4. Her claiming that I never implemented what my therapist advises and that I have not grown or changed and am still a child at this juncture. I tuned out of the conversation and ceased my efforts to remain mature. 5. Her stating, when you behave like this, it makes me want to slap that smug look off your face. Despite the fact that my expression was perfectly neutral, she has struck me in the past when becoming extremely upset with actions I took, whether justified or unjustified, to which I retorted, go ahead, you have already thrown your bottle at me. After the 5th point, she rose, seized my keys from the key hook, hurled them at me, and instructed me to leave because she could not remain near me. Approximately an hour after this incident, I am composing this text from my apartment. I want to clarify that we do not engage in fights like this frequently. Our disagreements 97% of the time do not escalate to yelling, throwing objects, or name-calling. We share a generally happy and healthy relationship and have recently been discussing engagement and marriage, with plans for an overseas trip this summer for her to meet my extended family. This particular situation is so bewildering and perplexing to me that I felt the need to seek external assistance. Any comments, insights, or advice would be immensely valuable. In summary, we got into an argument because she felt unheard, while I perceived it as a misunderstanding stemming from a genuine, did not hear her situation. This escalated into her attacking me, accusing me of lying, insulting me, and throwing things, while I entered defensive mode attempting to share my perspective, which she viewed as fabrications and making excuses. Ultimately, she ended up kicking me out. What strategies can we implement to de-escalate similar situations in the future? Story 3. I 24F broke up with my first love 22M over the phone saying, I still love you, but I need time to heal. After years of cycles, mixed emotions, and trust issues, he cried, so it was all for nothing. Now I'm left questioning, is there hope for us after all this? I need advice and would like to hear other perspectives on this. I cannot get out of my own head. Our relationship has always been tumultuous, but it felt worthwhile because it was him. Then a cycle began. This will be long, so in summary, after years of this cycle, things drastically improved. Yesterday, I broke up with my boyfriend over the phone, even though I wanted to take a break and tell him in person. I have not healed from what he had broken. Now I am experiencing a multitude of mixed emotions. How do I heal from this? Do you believe a future together is possible? The second to last paragraph is the breakup. The last paragraph is my question. He and I, female, are both in our early 20s and were together for a little over 3 years. We met when he was 19 and I was 20. We started communicating and our conversations grew deep. It is important to note that very early on he told me he had trust issues, but I was still okay with that. I thought I would be able to prove to him that he could trust me. We continued talking and the first few months were magical. We had incredibly deep conversations, enjoyed romantic dates, created playlists with stories from our lives for each other, exchanged beautiful handwritten letters, spent late nights getting lost in the city while gazing at the stars, and he even gifted me a necklace that I still wear every single day. He was my first kiss, my first time, my first love, my first everything. He would often look into my eyes, saying that they hypnotized him. He claimed he could not maintain eye contact for too long or I would turn him to stone. After a few months, one day he gazed into my eyes and said that they no longer had that effect on him. Although I was hurt, I pretended I was not affected. He took his comment back the next time we met, but soon after he said he could not commit due to personal issues. I expressed my sadness but told him I understood and would wait for him. I watched him turn and walk away as I cried. I cried endlessly. A few days later, he called me, invited me to an event, and made me his girlfriend. Despite feeling a little hurt from his earlier departure, I was thrilled that we were together. The next couple of years were filled with more magical dates and thoughtful gifts exchanged between us, but to be honest, there were more downs than ups. We both had busy schedules, but I consistently reserved certain days and times for him. Unfortunately, he did not reciprocate the effort. We saw each other once a week for a while, but eventually those meetings became increasingly infrequent, even though he continually promised we would spend more time together. He became cold and distant. He made rude comments, sometimes even to strangers. He made me cry on 2 of my birthdays. His demeanor changed significantly, becoming erratic. He would bottle everything up, push me away no matter how hard I pleaded to let me support him, and then when he pushed me away just a bit too far, he would return, apologize, and reveal what was happening in his life. This pattern continued, with him pushing me further away each time and then clinging to me all the more. He certainly had a lot going on in his life, which I understood. But so did I, and I never pushed him away or said the hurtful things he said. He was also very insecure about other men. I ended up cutting off all my male friends for his sake. I was too afraid to even stand beside male coworkers for too long because I worried he might see me and lose trust in me. I ended up hurting many old friends by ghosting them. A few other issues concerned me, such as bursts of anger which he never directed at me, questionable views and comments regarding women, and his poor relationships with his mother and sister. He did have family issues, so these behaviors could be understandable. Nevertheless, I always gave him the benefit of the doubt because when we were in the positive part of the cycle, he treated me well and respected me. As the cycle continued and worsened, the effort diminished, our time together dwindled and trust eroded. I experienced heartbreak repeatedly. I found myself crying more days than I smiled. Yet I stayed because those highs were so beautiful. I had never felt anything like that before. I had never loved anyone the way I loved him. However, my anxiety peaked and I began to return to the disorganized attachment style push-pull I had worked so hard to unlearn due to these intense highs and lows. My eating disorder slowly began to resurface. I developed deeper trust issues due to his actions. It felt as if his wounds bled onto me and they became my wounds. I think I also had some past wounds reopened as well. Eventually, I realized that discussing his behaviors was not helping the situation. I grew distant and my texting became less frequent. I almost mirrored his energy. When he noticed, he felt guilty. He would apologize, saying that he would work on things, but why did it take my withdrawal for him to notice? Eventually, I could no longer endure this cycle. After 2.5 years of this pattern, I almost ended things last summer. During one of the first moments I had ever witnessed him cry truly break down, choked up and sobbing, I requested no contact. However, he broke it a few times, sending me sweet messages, apologies, and beautiful love songs. Ultimately, I broke the no contact very early on because I missed him, I loved him, and I knew he loved me. However, I had not healed from what had been broken, and I believe that contributed to the current circumstances. After the near breakup, everything changed. The Life Story playlists returned, he began to spend more time with me, he cuddled more after intimate moments, he engaged me in conversation and was more open, and the beautiful nights that had once been abundant at the beginning returned. He even gifted me incredibly thoughtful presents to take with me to my new university, such as a jar of 100 Things I Love About You, and a custom Spotify glass frame with pictures of us and one of my favorite songs from Steven Universe. It was everything I had always wanted. However, I was still hurt. I could not admit it back then, but it was too late. I could not help but wonder, why did he only do this when I was already on my way out? I chose to stay because he genuinely worked on many aspects of himself, and I believed in him. I believed in us. There have been a few downs since then, but overall our relationship improved. His relationships with friends and family improved, his mental state improved, and I could not be more proud of him. This is why I feel so heartbroken to say that I am still stuck. I am trapped in the past. I never managed to heal those wounds, which left me feeling paranoid and anxious constantly. I became the one who could not trust him, unable to lower my defenses. I was distant, perhaps not cold, but certainly distant. I felt like an awful person for feeling this way. Fast forward to a week and a half ago, he was caught ice skating with another girl. When I questioned him about it while crying, he assured me it was just a coworker. Eventually, I resigned myself to the notion that I would never know the truth. But then I realized how I had to cut off all my male coworkers and friends, begging him to trust me, showing him photos, and so on. It also dawned on me that, alongside my constant anxiety that things might go south again, I was the one now afraid of him cheating, especially with evidence suggesting it could be true. It became evident that, in terms of trust and distance, the roles had switched. He and I had several lengthy discussions. He told me that I had every right to feel the way I felt and that if he were in my situation, he would probably react even worse. He apologized for everything he had done in the past, acknowledging that the wounds I was trying to heal were caused by his actions. I appreciated his accountability. However, he often expressed frustration by asking what more he needed to do to show his love, insisting that he has been doing better and that I was not responding to it. One thing he said deeply affected me. When I asked if he believes I love him, he replied, "At the moment, no." After everything, after I had stayed through all the turmoil, he did not believe that I loved him. I was devastated, but I felt compelled to ask what I was doing to make him feel that way. Fast forward to yesterday. I texted him inquiring when he would return from a trip and expressed my desire to talk in person upon his return. He called me anxious and I told him to enjoy his time away and that I would see him when he got back. However, he persisted in discussing it and eventually everything came to a head. He exclaimed, "But I have been doing better." I acknowledged that he was correct and stated that, at this point, I had to take responsibility. He changed, I flipped, and it was my responsibility to fix myself. I told him I did not want to end our relationship. In fact, I confessed that I was uncertain about what I wanted. My love for him was so intense that it pained me to admit I was still hurting even though he had tried so hard. Yet I knew I needed time to myself to truly understand why I felt this way and how to address it, as I felt overwhelmed with anxiety in this relationship. He reacted by saying it was all for nothing, expressing his anger that he had tried so hard while I was still unhealed. I reassured him that I still enjoyed our time together and did not want it to end indefinitely. I explained that I just needed time to heal and that I still loved him very much. He struggled to comprehend how someone could love another and choose to give up. He also voiced that taking a break was merely prolonging the inevitable. It felt like I was waiting for a verdict of yes or no regarding our future together. I acknowledged that might be a fair point and that perhaps it would not be equitable to him. I said, "I love you," and he in an agitated tone retorted, "Do not just say it." He asserted, "I will not give up until I hear you say it." I then affirmed my feelings, telling him I did not want this to end, but I believed it had to end for now for me to heal. The last thing I said while sobbing was, "I love you." He replied, choked up, "I have to go." For those of you who actually read this, thank you. It truly means a lot to me. I need to hear something from an unbiased perspective outside of my own thoughts. My question is, how do I heal from this? How do I move past this? Do you believe a future between him and me where we are both healed is possible? I understand that I hurt him yesterday and he could either move on, resent me for the rest of his life, or simply not want to be with me anymore. However, if he does want to be with me, could there still be hope given our history? Story 4. From Alaska's shadows to the brink of crime, my journey began with a mother's death and a chaotic life. I didn't even want to work to just pay all my earnings in transportation costs, I thought. Now, with a ticket for no insurance, am I destined for a criminal record? This is the story of how I became a criminal. Ironically, I watched Breaking Bad this year and completed the series. I was not even aware of how easy it was to become a criminal in the first place, but anyway. I belong to the demographic that constitutes a criminal because I associate with criminals. I live beside criminals, I attended school with numerous criminals, and frankly, the fact that I was not one sooner is criminal based on the logic being presented here, of course. Essentially, I would like to begin the story with some background information about myself so we understand the evil we are dealing with here. I am from the dark lands of the North, Alaska. I was born on Halloween, and ironically, I was born right after a man accidentally blew himself up in my childhood garage. I am not sure of a less direct or indirect way to express that. I had a strong start to life because of this event, but things started to decline rapidly. My mother was around 42 years old when she had me after previously having 4 boys. Thankfully, I was born prematurely, cross-eyed, and had a gene that made me resemble a cartoon character with pink spots, not quite that dramatic but essentially, and had the potential to be around 4 feet 10 inches tall with a deformed face. Fortunately for me, I only dealt with those traits extremely mildly, except for the short stature. I was the smallest until I permanently reached nearly 5 feet 6 inches at around 12 years old, which was taller than both my parents. Anyway, I was born a girl, and that confused me the most, so between having my teeth protrude straight out of my face and being obsessed with anime, I was quite an oddity. No amount of money could fix me, to be honest. By the time I was about 7, my family had mismanaged our finances, and I mostly consumed ramen, bread, and other wheat products. I definitely had a sugar addiction. Alright, a little off track. I was about 15 when my mother died of cancer after suffering for 9 months. On the same day she passed away, I registered for the alternative high school, where I earned a 4 GPA and completed high school in 2 years with a scholarship to college through foster care, but that does not fit our narrative of me. I am horrible. Anyway, I flunked out of college alongside my sort of foster brother. He and I traveled to the big island of Hawaii with another friend and became poor farmers for a while. I had some debt that I needed to pay, so I left and became a salmon processor, where I was promoted all the way to manager and ran the factory by myself. I also transitioned around this time, which has sort of sidelined my career because I need to share a room. Salmon season only lasts a couple of months, so I had to get creative when it came to surviving the rest of the year. I decided to enter the reselling business in Hawaii, where I purchased land and made enough money for an ideal life in Colorado. At this point, I am married. Unfortunately, my spouse, who I feel I am largely stuck with, is mentally challenged in ways that are frustrating to me. My theory is that they have untreated autism and have made substantial progress, but they seem to have made it their mission to undermine our life here in Colorado. Despite not accomplishing much in Hawaii, they managed to become a technician and secure a well-paying job while we were briefly separated. After they nearly died, we decided to get back together. I was excited and chose to quit my job to focus on reviving my reselling business. I concentrated on developing skills and various other activities, but mainly on being a cat dad, cooking, and cleaning. My sort of foster brother lived with us, and I was attempting to assist him because life is hard. He paid a little under $400 a month to rent a room, but he did not contribute much at all over the 2 years and primarily ate takeout each night. He really did not help me at all as I battled through everything. Anyway, 2024 was when things started to deteriorate for me. My foster brother did not share the same feelings concerning family or anything constructive, and another friend of 12 years moved in and contributed nothing as well. We had my spouse's sibling move in as well with their boyfriend. They paid half the rent and things were manageable. So then what did I do? Well, my ride-or-die aunt passed away. Her heart unexpectedly failed, and I was already planning to go to Alaska to visit family since another friend of mine decided to recreate the first event that occurred in my life by sharing another completely different tragic story. I was in Alaska when my spouse called to inform me that they had packed everything and left. We had our cats, however, I left as soon as possible knowing I had work in Alaska. Why did this matter? Well, when my spouse and I got back together, they became obsessed with a game called Isuki, Slow Life, and managed to spend $15,000 of their money behind my back. We had a budget, but they conveniently omitted that money, and our lives never improved. No debt was paid down, and we were no closer to the business nothing. I was utilizing the last of the debt I could afford to spend on my trip to Alaska, which was about $700. I had not gone out or done anything all year, just content when we could eat McDonald's. I also worked on a lot of art. My spouse, after embezzling all our money while knowing we came from a shack in the Hawaiian jungle where we used a bucket for waste and had no refrigeration, packed everything and left while I attended a funeral. When I returned home, the cats were okay, but the water pump was broken because they had not provided any water. My siblings' plans failed, and they moved back in only to reveal that they had lied about getting a new job and had been laid off for a month. Then their sibling and my friend left without paying the last month's rent. I stood flabbergasted because one moment I was on track to be debt-free, with savings, and my business finally started. And then I'd lost 26,000 because I had to sell the van we invested 11,000 in for only 3,000 to avoid eviction. Now for the grand climax. I had the brilliant idea to purchase an electric car to qualify for either the state and or federal tax credit of 7,500. I shopped around carefully and secured a manufacturer rebate on a 2025 car. I ensured everything was legitimate, and I even have the papers to confirm this. I thought if this car costs 14,000, then I owe 14,000, and with the 15,000 tax credit, that means I effectively got a free car. Of course, my plan was to pay off all my debt with this money and move back to Alaska to attend college to become a corporate lawyer after I acquired a USDA loan for land. Since I am from Alaska, all of this would belong to me. I plan to sell the 2025 car for the entire loan amount to CarMax or anyone really, since it had less than 4,000 miles. I would have money for an older Prius and a small dry cabin. Everything appeared to be fine. But this is how I became a criminal indeed. I needed the 800 to register the car. Then it seemed that there would be no tax credit, a significant setback in my plan. Additionally, it had just come to light that the manufacturing rebate was a scam, meaning I may only be eligible for the state refund. However, I am currently rejected until I send in the receipt for the car and they process that in the months to come, and perhaps we could still receive it. Yes, so my car still isn't registered, of course. One of my brothers came to town for a cheap vacation. We were returning from the bar where we played pinball, and I did not drink, of course, and as if the stars had aligned that day, my insurance, unbeknownst to me, lapsed. We promptly got it again, but I still received a ticket for no insurance and no registration, and I must appear in court nearly a month after I fly back to Alaska, where I may have secured a job at a salmon cannery. The problem is that I cannot attend court because my phone will be turned off. I will surrender this car to the bank right before I leave, resulting in further losses, and my debt has ballooned from a manageable 4,500 to roughly 6,000. Plus, my spouse, who I am still with, since their plan after being unemployed for the last 6 months is to either be homeless or relocate to Arkansas to live with their parents. I am like, no, I share a loan and cannot divorce because I do not have 300. They need to come to Alaska and work off this debt they share with me. Moreover, during this time, they signed for a random car for their sibling's boyfriend. Therefore, their debt is also successfully doubled, where they owe around 6,000 for that car, and I have my 6,000 plus an undisclosed amount that the bank will not recover from this auction. I believe my spouse might also receive another settlement check from one of the 2 accidents they experienced. Did I mention they also damaged our car that we are auctioning off by hitting a curb really hard for no good reason? It is quite frustrating, but you may ask where I have been in terms of securing a job these last 6 months since returning from those funerals. Why didn't I do XYZ? Like, I could pay an attorney to attend my court date for me instead of not showing up and consequently missing a criminal hearing, which would lead to a warrant. So as of now, my best option is to take my cats and go to Alaska. As for why I did not secure employment in the 5 months my spouse has been jobless, it is mainly due to a plethora of excuses for which I did not even try. Reflecting back, I think I could have made a significant difference had I just found a job. Anyway, regarding employment, why I would heed my spouse when I asked them to address this and secure a job which they claimed would not be an issue when they ultimately barely tried, I do not know. I feel like I have always been a seasonal worker and hustler, so as long as the drive kicks in, I can earn income. Ultimately, I was aware the entire time that I would receive 15,000 and I did not want to unnecessarily drive our car. I did not want to work just to have all my earnings consumed by transportation costs, and my aunt whose heart failed worked herself to death with 3 jobs. Okay. I applied everywhere around me multiple times, but I simply do not get chosen. I mean, I am 28 years old with no fast food experience. I was a barista at the homeless shelter as my second job since I have been working on and off since my mother passed away. There is not much I haven't done that is not barred due to degree requirements, of course. I am going to be okay, but I wanted everyone to know that if I do receive a criminal record, it is because I am terrible and not because I am impoverished. Story 5. I'm 27 and feeling sidelined while my girlfriend F26 moves out of her ex's home alone. I'll be back soon, she says, while limiting our contact to keep him comfortable. Is prioritizing his feelings over ours a red flag, or am I just overthinking things? Summary: I am feeling quite vulnerable in my new relationship. My girlfriend is transporting her belongings from her former partner's residence, where she has opted to stay alone with him to facilitate the move. This choice, along with her decision to limit our communication in order to avoid upsetting him, is causing me to feel neglected and extremely anxious. Furthermore, she has previously disclosed unresolved feelings regarding another past relationship, which heightens my concerns. I am grappling with the fear of becoming an afterthought in her life, and I am conflicted between wanting to support her and feeling that my own emotional needs are not being taken into account. I am uncertain whether I am simply overthinking or if my concerns are genuinely justified. Background. I have been dating this girl for a couple of months now, and we have grown incredibly close. We have already started discussing plans for our future together, including moving in within the next few months, renovating a home, and planning for children. She and I share many interests, and our connection developed almost instantaneously as we seem to click in a way that I have never experienced in previous relationships. She has been completely open with me about every aspect of her past traumas, mistakes, relationships, and so forth from the very beginning, and I have reciprocated, especially concerning my prior marriage, which I ended around the same time as her previous relationship. We are both at a stage in our lives where we have learned significant lessons about what we truly desire and are unwilling to compromise on, and so far, nearly everything indicates strong compatibility. A few months prior to our meeting, she ended a long-term relationship with her boyfriend, with whom she lived out of state, and relocated to the state where we met. She recognized that she and her former partner were not a good match, so she ended the relationship, an action he did not handle well. Due to financial constraints, she had to remain in the house for a couple of months, and after a considerably traumatic experience, she had to leave abruptly. Consequently, most of her belongings, including cars, clothes, furniture, and pets, had to remain in the home where her ex still lives. Fast forward to now, she is finally in a position to retrieve all of her belongings and officially move out of the house where she resided with her ex for several years. She is flying out today to spend 6 days there to pack her belongings, sell some items, close accounts, and prepare for starting a new life in another state. However, what concerns me is that she is undertaking all of this while staying alone in the house with her ex, who is still very much in love with her. She has maintained regular contact with him, daily phone calls and frequent texting since she moved out a few months ago, as she indicates that she feels guilty for leaving her possessions at his house and wants to ensure that things go smoothly this week, i.e., to prevent any harm to her belongings and pets, and to avoid any reluctance from him regarding her retrieving her items. She did express some worry that he would attempt to persuade her to get back together during her visit, but she has assured me that she no longer loves him, that she has no plans or desire to reconcile with him, and that she will return to me as soon as this is over. She also mentioned that he has been somewhat difficult and upset with her, especially in recent days and weeks, because he believes she has only been giving him the bare minimum in terms of contact and attention. I have experienced my fair share of unhealthy relationships and behaviors that I regret and have certainly outgrown, but aside from my adolescent years, I have never considered myself a jealous person or partner. I have every reason to trust her. Nonetheless, several aspects have been troubling me. Firstly, that she is staying in the house alone with her ex while handling her move despite having a considerable network of friends in that area she could stay with and having the financial means to afford a hotel. Additionally, she mentioned that she would accompany her ex to visit his family, as his grandparent is ill and they were like her family too. Furthermore, she cautioned me a couple of days before her trip that while she is there, she would need to limit her communication with me and keep things discreet so that neither he nor their friends discover that she has been seeing someone else. This is to ensure that her ex does not become uncomfortable and complicate matters. I have expressed my discomfort regarding how this situation has been arranged, how I wish she would have made plans to stay elsewhere, and how I do not understand why it requires an entire week of being alone with him, especially since they have no children, no shared assets, a clear division of belongings, and she is disposing of most of her larger items to keep only what she can fit in her car. I express that I do not enjoy feeling like a secret, given the seriousness of our relationship. I understand her desire to avoid discussing in detail how she has fallen for someone else, since he still loves her months after she left him. She apologized for making me feel uncomfortable, but has not offered to make any adjustments to her plans. I just feel like she is prioritizing her ex's comfort and their current relationship over my comfort and our relationship, which has caused me significant doubt and anxiety. Additionally, she informed me that after her split with her ex, she leaned on a mutual friend, with whom she eventually fell in love. She described him at the time as her saving grace and soulmate, stating that she loved him in a way she had never experienced before, and that they had plans for him to join her in moving out of state once things settled down. However, this plan never materialized, as a couple of months before we met, he ended the relationship and canceled their plans, leaving her to grapple with a second heartbreak, on top of the pain she was already healing from regarding her ex. She even mentioned a couple of weeks into our relationship that she still had feelings for him, but she has since claimed that those feelings have diminished as our relationship has unfolded. She possesses a few letters she composed to him that were never sent but which she still keeps. I discovered them while searching for something in a drawer. She indicated that she had arranged to have a friend, whose name she did not disclose, assist her in packing for the first few days while her ex is at work, and my anxiety has led me to feel suspicious that this person may be that friend. Please feel free to be blunt with me. Am I overanalyzing the situation? I understand that in addition to simply moving out, she is also parting ways with the life she built over several years. I want to provide her with the support and space she requires. However, I cannot shake the feeling of being an afterthought. Is she managing this situation in a way that is reasonable while I am being irrational? Have you experienced a similar situation? How did it impact your relationship?